Star 1978, Star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. Today I was talking about broken natural laws. Ties into naturalization, but the rationale and the irrationale on polygamy is, and quantum quark is very touchy subject, and we don't normally talk about it, but I got nothing better to do, and you've left me no options. So now, I don't remember the year, it was sometime in the 19th century, 9th decade, plus some amount of years. I was living in Cold Spring Harbor, and I went to a high school in Oyster Bay called St. Dominicks. Tie-in Louis Cattaruzza was doing some business called CIBDA, CIBDA, or it was called PRO back then, PRO. Not sure which one. I didn't follow his businesses. It was before WCN, which is Worldwide Corporate Network. Of how I have no idea. Is he purposely parallel dimensioning, picking these names to fuck with my ability to get anywhere in life? It feels that way. Excuse me. So, there was in St. Dominicks a boy who is a year younger than me named Brian Herman. And Brian Herman asked me out. But that got weird. I couldn't even tell you how to follow that story. But I know that he lived in Huntington Station, and he was going to Cold Spring Harbor. I'm sorry, he was going to St. Dominicks. And I needed to get, somebody said I should go, because after Cold Spring Harbor Junior High, I would walk into town to go see Lou when he was at 3 Harbor Road after the Roslyn office closed. Anyway, long story short is, there was a day where I went to go find my father's office with some recon team that offered to help me out after school, which I thought was really nice. I don't know if, like, Studick was there. I don't think Studick, it wasn't Mullally and Nick Santarelli and Kevin Rourke. It wasn't that crew. It was Herman, and I don't know who Herman hung out with. Might have been Rob Nicola, I'm not sure. But anyway, long story short is, I went with Herman. Oh, I think he was meeting people from Huntington, I don't know. But I walked down, somehow he stole a bottle of wine, red wine, from the back of a store, which I wasn't comfortable with. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why am I here? And then I'm just like, fuck. Like, what do I do now? And then somehow the entire scene, this is what parallel dimension is like in this United States of America, being Nicole Cattaruzza, being the icon and the idol. All of a sudden, time and space stops. My memory, my working memory, completely ends of drinking or tasting the wine out of a green bottle with some kind of basket bottom. And then, next thing I know, I got some football player where my head's at his butt, and he's carrying me, and I'm trying to, like, look up to see where I am, and it's nighttime. And he's telling me that he was at football practice, and he got a concerned citizen call, and I was walking into traffic, and I was drunk, and he had to carry me back home. And I'm like, wait, what? And she says, well, and then something happened, I can't remember, did he say, well, how's my butt look? And I'm like, well, are you always this big? And he goes, no, he's like, I came from football practice. And he said his name was Matt, M-A-T-T. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, we don't have a football team. I was like, you guys wear big equipment? And he was like, yeah. He said, they said that you didn't watch football. I didn't think that was possible. I was like, well, my high school doesn't have it. We only have a basketball team. I was like, so I did cheerleading for basketball, which is odd, but we didn't have football. And he was like, Right, I didn't believe that story. He's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, well, I'm feeling a little upside down. Because, again, I was upside down. And he was carrying me. I was like, am I too heavy? Do you want to put me down? I can walk. He said, no, no, no. He says, I was told that this is some kind of drunk drill or something, and I got to carry you, because otherwise I'm afraid you might walk into traffic again. And I'm like, I promise I won't walk into traffic. We could just walk normal. And I said, are you sure I'm not too heavy? And he said something about, no, at football practice, they carry really heavy stuff. Something about a dummy. But he didn't want to call me a dummy. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what that is, but all right. And then he said something EMS uses. I'm like, all right. And then all of a sudden, I'm on the grass at Nick Santarelli's house. Matt disappears. And then this guy, Nick, shows up, and then he's saying, no, no, I'm the Nick. I'm like, Nick Santarelli? I was like, why Nick Santarelli? And then he's like, no, no, no. He's like, I'm the Nick you're supposed to marry. And I go, you are? But I couldn't even, for some reason, I was so sick to my stomach. And again, it's the flip of the parallel dimension, but the sequencing is off, and then the working memory doesn't work so well. So I'm saying, well, where'd Matt go? Matt just carried me. I'm like, wait, is Nick pretending to be Matt? I was like, is this one of those National Archive things? Like, I mean, it's a national holiday? I'm like, I don't feel so good. And I kept, like, rolling over. I couldn't even, like, open my eyes. It was almost like being on a tilt-a-whirl. Like, my stomach just wasn't. And they're like, well, they're like, somebody said you were drinking. And I was like, I was drinking? I was like, wait, is that the part with Brian Herman? I was like, because Matt wasn't there for that. I don't know how I met this guy, Matt. He said he was a football player. He said he carried me here on his shoulder. I was like, but I don't really, this is getting confusing. And they're like, you know what? We believe you. Why don't you wait for Nick, since he's the one, not Santarelli, he works in our fire department, but why don't you wait for the Nick you're supposed to marry? And then you could just explain to him, because I think he wants to kiss you. And I'm like, he wants to kiss me? I was like, feeling this bad? I was like, and then I think Nick showed up, and he said something about poisoning. Oh my God, it was so confusing. And then the whole thing just disappears, and then I have no working memory of it. That's what it's been like working within this system as a white woman. Just wanting to marry Nick, not Nick Santarelli, not Mullally, not Chris Rourke, not Brian Studick, not any of the guys, not Don Handsome, whatever his name was. None of those. I just wanted my handsome, who I was built for. And apparently football knows. And then I think he even said, he's like, no, I play the football. It's like carrying a roast beef. I'm like, a roast beef? I was like, what kind of, I was like, isn't that the only football? All footballs are brown. And he goes, right, yeah, no, actually, as an American, you would know that. He was like, no, because he says, I hear that there's somewhere else they play a game called football, but football looks different, but I can't, my people, whatever. And I'm like, it's a different ball. And I'm like, oh. I was like, well, why do they call it football then if it's not roast beef football? I don't know. I mean, like, again, I'm just sister and, like, trying to work through the confusing humans we were all born to at some point in space and time that looked symbolically like the same zodiac boat. So, anyway, so he said, I think something about a quarterback. And I'm like, oh, that goes with football? And he goes, it does. He goes, in fact, it's actually, like, one of the most important positions on the team. And I'm like, why? I'm like, why? And then I'm like, also, because it was just hurting my stomach that I was, like, being carried that way. And I was trying to just adjust myself and not have my insides, I don't know, it was just a weird position, but to have a whole conversation on. But I wanted to be polite because it was so nice that somebody actually was being nice to me and was kind enough to rescue me from walking into traffic that I don't remember walking into. And then, I mean, again, this is how the working memory works. And then there's also this thing called seeded memories, SEEDED, which is when, not necessarily for us, but when they sequence up the wrong, like, sequence of events within your lifetime in order to forge and push through different future outcome at futzing with putzes and meatheads. And that's a problem. So, I don't know. So the guy, Nick, that showed up that wanted a kiss from National Security, that was concerned about my being poisoned and wanted the details on how that worked, and then was curious about what school the football player was from and whatnot, how I got on that schedule. And I'm like, I just woke up on his shoulder. I was like, I don't know. I was like, no, I mean, like, I'm clothed, he's clothed. He said I was walking into traffic. I was like, but, you know, again, I'm not one, whatever. Like, you know, gotta maintain a lady, whatever. So, no, I mean, again, he was kind enough to carry me. So, that happened. And then there are witnesses to that happened. And then you just go back to high school like it never happened, and then nobody talks about it, and then literally the working memory just disappears. And then it's like on an off chance, if it's important, oh, maybe I'll get it back so this way I can document it in wherever I landed in this century 20 plus 2 decades plus 1 year, which is 2021. And I'm still not with the Nick from National Security that I was supposed to marry in Happily Ever After. I got a completely different storyline. Not that I asked for it, not that I pushed for it, not that I was some really obnoxious teenager ever. I just sat in whatever day I woke up in and went along with whatever they were up to, and like, when's this guy coming for me? And like, happily ever after, get me away from Lynn and Lou. Since none of the other options and entry points are available to me, apparently. I mean, it is so painfully obvious. So that happened. And then there was another point of contention I wanted to mention about parallel dimensional work, and then the seeming together of seemingly innocence, because football guy was innocent, I'm thinking. He didn't hurt me necessarily, and he tried to have a conversation with me, which was interesting, but I couldn't see his face, but whatever. And then, I gotta think about this, because I don't even have that full working momentous occasion memory. And then it's seamed together like a tailor with an iron into like a moment that wouldn't make sense in succession, because then I'm just laying on someone's front lawn, and then EMS and fire show up, and I'm just sitting on the lawn sick to my stomach, and they're not sure whether I was actually poisoned, but they're like, no, if she just came from with Matt, the football player, he wouldn't have poisoned her. Where was she before that? Nobody in whatever group was hanging around knew, or maybe they did. And then I think, they're like, well, did you ask her? Does she remember where she was? And I'm like, it depends on, and they're like, well, would a calendar day help? And I'm like, not really. I was like, I think, is this the day I went looking for my dad's office in town? I mean, again, it sounds absolutely ridiculous and crazy, but this was what was being a teenager in the state of New York on Long Island without, for lack of a better word, Niklaus Hitler with me, to protect me. I mean, he's the one I'm supposed to grow up and get married. Is that the common name, the pseudonym, the nickname, the alias that we're going with? And like, how do you protect someone? I don't know. Is it his born identity? I don't think the letters in his name are in an alphabet character. So is it really relevant? I didn't think so. I gotta think about this, because no, there was something else that was really relevant to where I'm stuck in the here and now. I gotta pause this for a second. And then I have a Cold Spring Harbor memory the following year, which was the same Nick, I think. And Don Saladino, and I don't remember if it was Chris Lyons invited me out to meet him in Huntington for a drink. And I was like, how am I going to do that? I'm not going to be able to get in. I was like, I'm only 16. I don't think they let you into bars around here. He's like, no. He's like, I know the owner. And I'm like, all right. So I took a cab down. Don Saladino, and I think Dave Lyons was there. But Chris Lyons is the one who told me to go down there. And then there was some Polish angry guy drinking something, wanted to talk to me about a garage and what a garage meant in America, what my house looked like, what a garage, and where it was on the house that I was living in or being held in. And the town was empty. Like, there was like nothing in the town. It was just all us. And then all of a sudden, I guess it's Nick walked in, and he said that he owned my painting, and I was the girl, and I was in a tie-dye t-shirt, and then he was in a rugby shirt, I think it's called a rugby shirt, and he was trying to be charming, and I was trying to follow along, but I was having trouble because he said we went to school together, and I could not, for the life of me, I had no working memory of it. I could not pull up a working memory of ever seeing anybody as handsome as him in Cold Spring Harbor, ever, or Lloyd Harbor Elementary. But again, in this diseased process and this diseased sequence, it's part of dementia, amnesia, and what's going on with memory loss. It's a viral process. I mean, New York, I'm suffering from it horrifically in New York. It's very choppy. So I had a second process, not just with football, Roastbeef football player. I guess that's the All-American hometown hero, or he wanted to be considered that. I'm like, so why wouldn't you be? He said, I don't know. He said, but that's really important where I come from. He says, because that determines your whole life. Like, if you're going to meet a wonderful wife and you're going to have nice things and whatever. And I was like, why is my life different than that? Because I thought that's how it worked. And he's like, yeah, you know what? He's like, with this whole, he's like, I can't answer that right now. He says, because I really don't know about you right now. And I'm like, all right. I was like, do you know why? And he says, well, I don't know. He's like, it doesn't really seem like you have anything to hold on to. I was like, right. I was like, hold on to like what? I'm holding on to you right now so I don't fall off. And he goes, no. He's like, I get that. He says, but where you're growing up, there's no like anchor feature to bring to the, I guess it's family members, ancestors. I don't know what your family uses. I'm like, I'm like, all right. And then Don Saladino came the day after Nick just appeared. And then we had courtyard moment outside, which was weird for me. And then he just disappeared. And I was left with a weird pairing of that, which might have been why Don showed up. Almost because it felt like trickery and it didn't feel right. And I said, what's this word rape? I was like, Don, I don't know. I said, I don't really talk to my Lou and Linda. I don't really talk to the people that I live with. I was like, what is this word rape? I was like, no. I was like, you mean like the stuff that they're doing on TV with like the after school drama show? I was like, I don't watch that stuff. I'm here. I'm working every day. And so he's like, yeah, he's like, no, I see that about you. He's like, so that word doesn't mean anything to you and your family never heard them? I was like, no. And he's like, oh, he's like, yeah, that's what my dad keeps senior people, but I don't know. They don't trust one another, but they don't really know anything about you. And I'm like, uh-huh. I was like, all right. And he's like, well, he's like, the guy you were with, the guy who you really, really liked and who really, really likes you, wants to come back for you, wants whatever, he's like, be with you, is named Nick, just so you know. And just so this way I told you and my dad's whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, thank you. I was like, it just feels like trickery. Like, like, that's the only thing I'm left with is just confusion. I'm just confused. And he's like, oh, that was all. Never talked about it again. Never brought it up with anybody ever again. Why bother? Like, who really cares this much about all my shit? Honestly. Now I'm just documenting it for Nooch and Alexander, and Benjamin, Daniel seems like he's fine, but for Ben, if he gets lost along the way, if he gives a shit, which he doesn't look like he does. There was one other thing. I'm going to pause this for one more second, catch my thoughts. There was a bar scene where I went out, I thought it was with Peter and Sarah, but I walked through the door and I think I was somewhere in Holbrook with two totally different guys, and then I went back through the door and I was in Smithtown, Comac, and then I came back in. And that was the guy who was very, very handsome, and I would have left that night with him. But I was married to Jay at the time, and I had Benjamin. And for some reason, that was a problem, although he had a black badge, and he had a black, some kind of leather wallet thing with a card in it with writing I couldn't read. And it wasn't an alphabet. It wasn't the alphabet that I use. And I think that was 2000 or 2001. But maybe it just turned 1. I don't know, somewhere around there. And I wanted to leave with him right away. I was like, no, I don't want to be married to Jay. I already know that I don't want to be married to Jay. I was like, I already know what's going on in my personal. I don't talk about it. But I am not comfortable. And that was right around the time that he started choking me. And then the guy just disappears, and nothing ever happens up from it. I don't know what's going on with Department of Homeland Security, but I don't understand why Nick can't come back and just take me to wherever he needs to. It's not like anything American's even fucking important. If your quarterback's important and whatnot, great, hold on to that. But in Bayside Station, there's not a fucking thing other than a bunch of shitbags causing a whole lot of problems. Oh, Lynn's watching a TV show. It's called, I don't know what it's called, but it's about the cowboys and the Indians. It's not an old Western, it's a modern Western. In fact, one of the guys, it looks like he's wearing a condiment. It's a ketchup and mustard, different color, but it's the color relations in bright colors. And, like, they're doing a TV series, and there's a tribe called the Sioux. And I'm like, is that like a lawyer special? It's like the lawyers love to sue each other's tribes in this Western while I'm sitting here in a whole lot of trouble. And, like, I never get anywhere good because they're all always in trouble at Pinkerton and outlaw level. I'm just curious. Did anybody check the rationale and the irrationale on those outlaws? I know in Europe, it's Auslander. But I know it seems outlandish, but whatever. It's September 10th, 2021. It's Nicole Cattaruzza. I'm still in Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361, and I am not faring as well as the majority of my genetic brethren. Let's put it that way. This 1978, Century 19, Decade 7 plus 8 years has not been kind to me whatsoever. And I did nothing to deserve this treatment of everybody just ignoring me and keeping Nick out of my life.